Olga took his hand. It felt dead. He wasn't dead, because his hand had been neatly severed at the wrist. There was no blood, and he wasn't screaming, just looking at his hand in hers. Of course there was no blood. Why would there be? It was the look on Yevgeny's face that bothered her. Yevgeny blinked, snake-like. Sorry, man, hand slipped. Look, they'll be here soon, so best not let them see you like this. Olga's usual lassitude was gone. In a flash, she bundled up the hand, the matchet, Brian and Yevgeny, and clasping the parrot to her bosom, pushed them all out of the door. She surprised herself by keeping hold of the parrot. After all, she'd been really after a cockatoo. She quickly locked the door, which thankfully had a key in place. Yevgeny shuddered as the icy cold air hit him. The air, like a vice, gripped his heart, and its beating, urgent, relentless, made him think he ought to drop into his surgery. But the memory of Olga's kiss, hard on his cheek, made him reconsider. But the word agency flashed through his brain, as if lit in piercing strokes of white neon, reminding him of that weird neon place in Walthamstow not long ago. This was certainly not Walthamstow, though. These streets belonged to Central European city, certainly. But the dogs. He desperately wanted a smoke, but couldn't bear to ask her for a light. He bit his lip and kicked the nearest dog. Early that morning, Yevgeny had left them at the vet's for spaying. Above the dark, wet streets, a helicopter throbbed an impersonal beat.
You always make it about you, you fuck, and you know I can't bear animal cruelty.
Napped Olga. The dog yelped, but police sirens could be heard in the distance, squealing like frenzied puppies, flashing whites of their eyes. The parrot struggled to free itself and suddenly rose into the air with a hand in its beak. The usual stoic Brian began to whimper, clutching Olga's soaking leg. A menagerie of metaphors evaporated in the mist. The bastards are still tracking the wrist tracker, muttered Yevgeny. The matchet fell from the wrapping as the parrot soared and the sirens grew closer. It landed with an icy clang, a dozen meters from the only recently arrived, freshly polished standard military issue boots of Schmidt. He froze. He raised a quizzical eyebrow.
Where's the fucking car and why are you so fucking late, Schmidt?
Snarled Olga. Brian burbled grateful, indeterminate noises of recognition and running to his uncle's surprised embrace. Pipe down, the car's around the corner. The smell of freshly baked muffins gave hope, at least briefly. Olga eyed Brian and Schmidt at the boot. They obviously knew each other. But how?
Shut the fuck up with your muffin burble, Brian. You're going into shock.
Snarled Olga, desperately trying to regain a narrative thread. 2 or 3 blocks away, doesn't matter how many, there was a screech and a flash of red and green, and an employee of the state bank called Hubert found a curled and bloody object in his lunchbox. The salsa had leaked all over his Doritos. The ladies of Mexican nights were dancing so beautifully, and Hubert knew that this lunchbox was a grim warning. Everybody wondered why Olga had to swear so much. Somewhere far away, a sad tarantella played, and Olga stood silent and still. Olga leaned against Yevgeny and wondered why Schmidt was taking so long. He remembered his grandma's strange friend dancing the tarantella. Her name was Esmeralda. His grandma would have grimaced. She always did that on Tuesday night at 9:15. Schmidt appeared without the car. Olga sighed. She had now completely lost any hope of narrative coherence. No wonder she was reduced to swearing so much, never using her prolific vocabulary.
If only we could start over.
Their time seemed to freeze, except for a dilutive man who now advanced on Olga and her companions from behind a bin.
Putain!
Cried Olga. She liked to vary the language of her cursing, although not its crudity.
You useless mad-ass, Schmidt! Go get the car now, you fucking connard!
Schmidt grinned and thought, what a woman! He didn't know about women, but he knew about snakes. They were friendly, really, if fed. But as Schmidt shuffled off, having removed his boot, which was pinching so, there came the familiar foot of the lime green Messerschmitt that was his pride and joy. Olga rolled her eyes.
Not Schmidt's Messerschmitt, not again.
They came to rest against the back wheel of the bubble car.
Get in,
Olga commanded. Is this your car? Asked Hubert, who had followed the vapour trail left by the hot parrot. Evidently the budget cuts had not been kind to Schmidt's sector. Scowled and with all the amputations and with the parrot lost amongst the tower blocks, they all just about fitted in the little vehicle. The snake hesitated as if to strike, then, eyeing the ragtag group, thought better of it and curled up in the wheel well.
What's with the fucking snake?
Asked Olga, reverting back to her use of short sentences with expletives and saving her good vocabulary. Waiting for Olga was beginning to become a habit, and the normally punctual Lev was getting a bit impatient, as was the president, who did not like to be kept waiting. Where was she? The appointment at the embassy had taken months to finalise, and now Olga was going to blow all their plans. Trust Schmidt to screw it.
It's part of a new act.
Schmidt, pointing to the lavender lettering Cirque Olga on the bonnet.
Fucking impossible, Schmidt.
She was smiling. Sliding in next to the snake, she grabbed its throat and throttled it. Or at least that's where she thought his throat would be, if it weren't one long digestive tract. The lunch she had grasped was Yevgeny.
Oh, how is this even possible?
He knew she had to get her fingers behind the head to pry the mouth open so she could get at the fangs. And yet, did she really want partially digested Yevgeny all over the Messerschmitt? Schmidt read her thoughts and marvelled at Olga's practicality, even under pressure. Olga took out her hairbrush and began to brush Hubert's thinning hair, amid all the confusion of the moment, and the more she brushed, the more it thinned. Meanwhile, dawn was breaking over Casablanca, and as the new morning sun shimmered above the camel farm, Olga's long-lost twin, Nazreen, finished milking her favourite cow, Satnav, and wondered to herself.
Good day to die.
And why? Why did she think that? After all, she was a Shropshire lass. As she moved slowly across the courtyard, milk pail in hand, a light breeze causing her hair to brush against her cheek, Nazreen realised that someone was watching her. The Messerschmitt seemed to crackle with cruel sense of pleasure as the engine fired up once more. Olga was murmuring to herself, but spoke for everyone when she asked,
Where the fuck are we and where the fuck are we going?
The snake stirred in Olga's fist and hissed its agreement. Some 15 minutes thence, does it matter if it was 16 or indeed 14, Hubert, now relishing his new role as the unfortunate Yevgeny's replacement, brought the Messerschmitt to halt in the embassy's specially reserved parking space.
Give me the briefcase and fucking wait in the fucking Deutsch heap of fucking trash till I get back, and without collecting any more fucking animals,
said Olga crisply, smoothing the lines of her little black Dior suit. At the back of her mind, she knew she would eventually have to store the little black number in her mother's freezer, along with the python, of course. Lev was waiting at a side door eating a cheese sandwich, his second-hand Swiss Guards uniform flapping uncomfortably in the breeze.
Baci caro,
Said Olga, using a very good Italian accent, offering a hand, fortunately for Lev it was not Brian's, and caressing Lev's swarthy cheek with the other. Are they ready for me? Lev blushed. It had been years since he'd been given a free caress, so to speak, and he suddenly felt terribly self-conscious. He managed to blurt out, While Lev stood mesmerised by Olga's familiar menacing smile, wondering absently where her 2 front teeth had gone, her gaze wandered to the shadow forming behind him, and she gasped.
Ambassador, you're fucking spoiling us.
She smarmed. Several fragments of Gruyere landed on her as Lev sputtered in confusion. That's quite a dream, said Olga's therapist, Dr. Unlikely Plot Twist. You lost your dog's hat. You can't walk instead. Sister Andrew now.
Fuck you.
Fat Olga.
You're a fucking quack. What do you know?
Nazreen squinted into the setting Casablanca sun, watching the silhouette of the approaching helicopter shimmer in the heat. It was moments like this that reminded Nazreen of all the beauty and wonder in the world, and she felt momentarily elated. She knew it was time to leave her beloved Casablanca and time to find the answer to the only question that really mattered. A serene smile fell from her lips as she collapsed under the helicopter gunfire, warm milk and blood mingling on the cool flagstones beneath her.
Why am I always the fucking subplot to that fucking sodding Olga?
She screamed at the bemused pilot as he faded from her dimming view. Schmidt leaned from the Messerschmitt as Nazreen's hair was whipped by the downdraft from the rotor blades, screaming her name.
My poor beloved Satnav!
She wiped the camel blood from her eyes with the sleeve of her frilly white blouse.
Warum bin ich von Frauen und Tieren umgeben?
Eyed Schmidt, using expert German, expertly piloting the Messerschmitt helicopter to the ground beside Nazreen and the corpses of Satnav and the large camel.
You fucking idiot!
Cried, having learnt all her best vocabulary from Olga, which made her wonder where Olga was.
Great to see you too.
Shouted Messerschmitt sarcastically over the whirring helicopter blades,
Put this on.
as he threw her a fresh white blouse over his left shoulder.
Oh, I hope this is Egyptian cotton, as like I'm not wearing it.
She replied, stripping off her tie-dye gypsy t-shirt.
Go on. Sorry.
In another life, I'd be fucking wearing a fucking your skirt, you rather shite.
He muttered. Back in Berlin, generations of unlikely plot twists, the Suffolk branch, peopled the paintings on the doctor's walls, amongst them 2 generals, a tugboat skipper and an unfrocked priest. Olga's sister, the one with the altogether darker character, which you could tell as she always wore sunglasses and had too much makeup on to hide a hideous facial scar that nobody dare ask about, entered stage left. The director and the rest of the cast looked at her with bemusement. Niall? Oh no, she shuddered, as some of her deepest fears coalesced around her praying eyes. She started with some relaxation exercising before beginning her rehearsed Lady Macbeth soliloquy. There was something familiar about one of the 3 witches who was busy eating her way through a ham sandwich. It was Tanya, the python. Tanya loved to crush, but no one but Olga knew that her favourite treat was in fact a ham sandwich. And Tanya and Olga had an unfinished fight, reference the throttling. When the curtain finally came down and the 3 witches returned to their day jobs in Woolies, Olga took a last nibble of her ham sandwich, scooped up Tanya under her arm, and decided it was time to sniff out that sly bag, the ambassador, once and for all. Nazreen climbed into the helicopter without revealing anything, having had celebrity and royal training to avoid pap shots.
Is it done?
She demanded. Schmidt nodded, opening a plastic bag and showing her the bloodied stump of Brian's hand.
And the cockatoo? Did you get the cockatoo?
I'm fucking it! screeched the cockatoo, poking its head out of Schmidt's pocket. Things are getting messy, Schmidt, hummed the unnecessarily cheerful bird.
Does Olga know?
He asked as the helicopter gained altitude. It was plain to see that some of Nazrine's camels had, in the confusion, got into her rapeseed and cauliflower fields.
Let's finish this,
He said.
Der Botschafter wartet Sie mittags.
Snarled Meister Schmidt, poking the cockatoo back into his pocket and sizing the controls of the chopper. Huh? She replied. Schmidt thrust a headset at Nazreen, though in truth he could read her lips. She was need to hear what he was saying if they were to have any chance of getting out of this camel and cauliflower infested hellhole alive.
Damned fool! I can't go to see the janitor like this, and certainly not yet.
Barked Nazreen. You mean the ambassador? Squawked the cockatoo, his feathers glistening in the moonlight as the Messerschmitt soared towards Stockport.
Look, for the 5th fucking time,
said Nazreen to the cockatoo.
We're not going to fucking Stockport.
Everything's out of control, said whoever's narrative this is. The cockatoo hung his head in disappointment and conceded that never again would he see Stockport. He was a season ticket holder at Edgeley Park and often sat on Jim Gannon's shoulder whistling my grandfather's scarf. Reasserting control, Nazreen barked the coordinates for the extract at Schmidt.
Land on the roof! They're expecting us!
Schmidt nodded, idly wondering which sister would win the fight. Nazreen narrowed her eyes.
In your dream, Schmidt.
Despite Nazreen's submissions, Schmidt was not engaged in an idle sexual fantasy, but was mentally calculating the value of the Maltese cockatoo, now gently snoring in his breast pocket. Schmidt's dreams did not extend much beyond the cockatoo fighting or its human equivalent. The lights of Berlin flickered in the distance as the Messerschmitt began its jittery descent. Meanwhile, in Reichstag, Chancellor Schmidt was sitting down to dine with the leaders of Greece, Luxembourg and Croatia. She had a moment of panic when she was unsure of their names, then dissolved into laughter when it came to her that they were all named George. Over on the other side of town in the ambassador's residence, a sleek, silver-haired butler offered around a platter of Ferrero Rocher to the assembled guests, one of whom, rather unimaginatively and without a trace of irony, said, "You're spoiling us, Ambassador." But I'll have my Me Too moment, she thought. The underdressed ambassador grinned corpulently as he thought about his fascinating subplot involving Olga's sister and the vegan sandwich substitution that only he knew had taken place the week before. And without her, Olga only had a few days to live due to a rare eating disorder. It was a race against time. Come on, Nazreen, Olga thought, there's not much time now. The hunt for a charcuterie still open during lockdown was in earnest, and only man for the job was Mac Black Ralph, who is already known to some of you. And then Olga remembered she didn't actually know anybody called Nazreen, but the sweet smell of fruitcake told her that the ambassador was hiding somewhere close by.
Mein Gott in Himmel!
Uttered Schmidt under his breath.
She looks so much like Olga. Her name slipped out. Maybe she didn't notice my foolish error.
No one said anything for a while. Matt Black Ralph, aka MBR, was in the Swiss Alps when he got the call. He knew a pork butcher on the Rue Saint-Denis who opened after hours and would sell you ham as long as you didn't ask too many questions. This was obviously an emergency, so MBR set off at speed for Paris, even though it was almost dusk and he was still wearing shades. The speedometer visibly shook as the dial entered the red zone. Nazreen yawned.
Oh, typical of you to go into the red.
He said, stifling another yawn.
Oh.
Schmidt watched Nazreen out of the corner of his eye. Olga yawned unexpectedly. Then she thought, why do I not know
the word for yawning in German? I'd better find my dictionary. Oh,
keep going. I'll have a drink. Rabbi Zilgman did not yawn as he hid a small brown paper bag in his pocket and walking quickly down Rue Saint-Denis, far away, far enough, that is, from the developing plot line. Hubert, a little crestfallen after the failure of Sir Kolga and the consumption by the snake of Yevgeny, Schmidt and Carr sat down in his favourite city square, lunchbox open and full of bloody ham sandwiches. Olga yawned again, for some unknown reason, thought of her brother, and then bit down aggressively on a bloody sandwich. Some fillings are too hard to bear. Look, said the snake, looking up at Olga from under her arm. If we're going to save the world, then you need to stop yawning and pull yourself together. Olga quickly reached for her buck rescue remedy and gave herself a good talking to. Olga knew she was right in a sort of unsavoury reptilian way, but why, she wondered, did the world never need saving when she was actually in the mood to save it? She smelt fruitcake again and missed her brother. If only Esmeralda were not an illiterate.
we know
Some
what
can
you
say
mean.
that. Deaf mute. His message to her might have made sense. She pondered on this conundrum and then quickly assessed it would take considerable arm strength to turn her scaly foe into a handbag. At that moment, she fancied a croque monsieur with a side of fries. Schmidt was the kind of guy that never yawned. Quite suddenly, someone yelled, "Yevgeny, come back!" And then another lone voice said, "No, don't!" Just at that moment, the Mexican muralists arrived along with their entourage of a mariachi band, 12 flamingos and a surrealist poet. Crocodile, they all said, at the same time, before chopping up and eating a watermelon.
Not more exotic animals.
Cried Olga.
You know they don't do well out of their natural habitat of salt flats.
Flat salts, salty flats, flatty satty, faulty tall tats. The surrealist poet improvised, relishing her ability to deconstruct the world's narrow, limited dimension focus.
This is a bloody nightmare.
Sighed Olga, resigned to the fact that without her essential daily intake of honey roast ham, she would continue to have these ridiculous, pointless visions. And where was bloody Nazreen when she was needed?
1 minute she's here, the next she's gone, and 1 minute a brother and next a sister. Am I going crazy?
It was a fluid situation in every sense. It was 11:59 p.m. and MBR screeched a halt outside the charcuterie in Rue de Saint-Denis, just in time to catch Pierre before he closed up for the evening, even though most of his clients knew that Pierre was not his real name. Real Ham was now just seconds away from being in reach. Roll Hyam had not used his full name since that unfortunate incident with a sherry trifle and alabaster figurine, and he could never tell whether customers were calling his name or making an order. Just as Chancellor Schmidt was pondering whether to risk trying to pronounce each George's name with the correct accent or blundering her way through Auf Deutsch, thus risking appearing Bavarian to avoid revealing that she really had no idea which George was which, Schmidt set the Messerschmitt down lightly on the roof. As they slipped out of the Messerschmitt, Nazreen whispered,
"Don't fuck this up!"
From his vantage point behind the Reichstag Eagle, the secret agent watched Nazreen and her team stream out of the Messerschmitt. Easy for you to say, and on to the roof. They were good. Maybe a little too good. But they had forgotten one very important person. Olga. Agent George Smith emerged from his hiding place behind the Reichstag Eagle With him was Olga, her arm painfully twisted behind her back, grimacing and cursing furiously.
Fuck.
Shut it, Olga.
She glared at him. Olga and Nazreen stared at one another, amazed. Only one word would do.
Fuck!
They cried in unison.
Evgeny is dead. He
Shouted
didn't
Olga,
say. Oh, and you're a girl.
Yeah.
said Nazreen.
So are you?
When you are both finished exploring your gender identities,
Smith finished his sentence.
we've got work to do.
Somewhere in Romania, Esmeralda laughed manically. Nazreen removed the hand from her pocket and licked it.
Whoa, how are we gonna save the world, sister?
You become Chinese.
Was the reply.
You might have a disease.
Quiet it, you two.
Said Agent Smith, twisting Olga's arm further behind her back.
It's the end of the line for you two, you pair of freaks.
That's when Nazreen realised Olga had been trying to tell her something all along. It wasn't real ham she wanted. She was warning her about real ham. Do you want the editorial note?
Oh, yes.
Editorial note. In order for readers to make sense of this rubbish, a brief key to the whereabouts of the characters is provided. Those who have managed to follow any narrative thread whatsoever may read on below. On the roof of the Reichstag, Schmidt, also known as Messerschmitt, the Cockatoo, Nazreen hand in hand with the hand, Agent George Smith, who's captured Olga, the Mexican muralist, the mariachi band, 12 Flamingos, the surrealist poet. Inside the Reichstag, having dinner, the ambassador, Chancellor Schmidt, George of Greece, George of Luxembourg, George of Croatia. Waiting outside in the car, Hubert, Tanya the Python, Brian collapsed due to loss of blood. Waiting outside Lev, Rabbi Zeligman, arriving at Speed, MBR, Real Ham. In Romania, Esmeralda, missing in action, the parrot. Olga began to feel faint as the lack of ham suddenly hit her adrenal glands. Moaning piteously, she collapsed. The Mexican surrealists and their mariachi band conferred anxiously before striking up another tarantella in the hope this would revive Olga. But instead, it incited even greater rage in Agent Smith, who gunned them down, finishing off the surrealist poet with a bullet to the back of the head as she desperately attempted to scrawl a few lines in flamingo blood.
Anyone else got anything to recite?
Snarled Agent Smith, pointing a new gun at Nazreen.
Hand over the Maltese Cockatoo or I'll blow up the building, and that's the international supply of Croatian lacework done for, which will lead inexorably to the collapse of capitalism.
Outside, Real Ham's Lambo screeched to a halt. Thrusting a package of charcuterie at Rabbi Seligman, he collapsed exhausted by the travails of speedy journey from Paris to Berlin. Lev, called the rabbi, we must deliver this pork to Olga so she can ensure that Luxembourgian mass tool production is not halted. She is the only hope for traditional Jewish songs. In the glittering dining room, the ambassador checked his Patek Philippe and made his excuses. Chancellor Schmidt was not disappointed, as she had slapped his soup and ogled her cleavage all night, and hadn't even made good with the Ferrero Rocher.
But I don't have the cockatoo.
Oh, Nazreen.
He flew away with the parrot. They will seek sanctuary with Esmeralda and Timiosora. They have an excellent aviary there.
Damn you bitches.
Cried Smith, putting another bullet into a twitching Mexican and twirling his moustaches with the other hand. Schmidt, who knew how many bullets all sidearms contained and was able to count them accurately, seized the moment. Schmidt opened his pocket and the cockatoo flew at Smith's face, tearing his eyes with its unmanicured claws. Just then, the rabbi and Lev appeared on the roof and rushed to help, battering Smith with the packet of ham. Smith staggered to the side of the building and fell through an unguarded and most un-German railing. He crashed onto the bubble car below, killing Tanya and Brian, who was still clinging to life. Hubert was nowhere to be seen. Nazreen wafted a small piece of pork under Olga's nose. Olga moaned and shifted slightly.
I thought I'd never see you again.
She wailed.
I thought you'd run off with the Maltese Cockatoo, which is why I got the parrot.
With that smooth there, with that fool Smith gone, our path is clear.
Said Nazreen.
Tell me, can you smell it?
Yes, brother. Sorry, sister. Yes, I can smell it. All that lovely gold. The ham has heightened my senses and my gold sniffing ability has returned. Soon, the Reichstag gold will be mine, all mine.
Ours? Ours?
Nazreen interjects.
Yes, of course.
She lifts her nose into the air and sniffs.
There, that cast iron water tank on the edge of the roof.
You need a drink?
Asks a puzzled Nazreen.
No, that's no water tank. That's the vault.
And all I can smell is fruitcake. You're amazing, my dear sister. Hiding in plain sight.
You need 2 rare and very important things to unlock the Reichstag gold bullion vault.
Says Olga with a crafty look on her face as they both scurry over towards the water tank.
Indeed you do.
Responds Nazreen, who also has a crafty look on her face.
You need one of these?
She whips a rather surprised-looking Maltese cockatoo out of her breast pocket. Olga gasps, looks at the bird in awe, and nibbles a little bit more of the sandwich like a small rodent.
But the Maltese cockatoo is useless alone. Even I know that.
Says Nazreen, looking at the suddenly deflated cockatoo.
What is the second? Will you finally tell me? Do you even have it?
Oh, stop playing silly beggars, Nazreen, and give me the bloody hand.
Says Olga impatiently.
What? This little thing?
And she pulls the hand out of her other pocket and gives it a crafty lick before handing it to Olga.
You know that old saying?
A bird and the hand are worth a bloody hand load more than a bush? I do indeed. This little hand is really a key and it's going to open that big vault for us. Now, I simply run the hand across the front of the tank, like so.
Ka-ching! Like some biblical parting of waves. As the hand touches the old water tank, the front panel splits to reveal a gleaming keypad and a giant red button.
Ah!
Gasps Nazreen.
Ah!
Gasps Olga.
A lifelong dream of expanding the Casablanca Canal Farm to incorporate a refuge for separated orphan twins with gender dysphoria are at long last within touching distance.
Look!
Says Nazreen.
It's the Georges. They're coming. Quick, sister. Heavens, and the flamingos. I thought they were dead.
Olga and Nazreen look at the cockatoo expectantly. Cockatoo. 640091176, squawks the bird. Olga starts to punch the numbers into the keypad on the vault as the myth-looking Georges and the flamingos scurry towards them from the other side of the Reichstag roof.
Yes, sister, sister. Just imagine what we can do to advance the cause of gender dysphoric twins as soon as we can get our hands on all this booty.
With an earth-shattering bloom, the water tank water tank explodes, taking with it the 3 Georges, Croatia, Luxembourg and Greece, and condemning to a slow death the key zither, matzo ball and lace-making industries of these countries. The ambassador, who thought he was safely hiding in the 3rd floor ladies' powder room, the chancellor, the remaining 3 flamingos, Rabbi Seligman, Lev, Schmidt, Olga, Nazreen, the Cockatoo, and the Bloody Hand. Bloody sections of various people and creatures landed in squelchy portions on the bubble car with a particularly large torso, quite possibly Schmidt, seeing off Tanya and the poor single-handed Brian. The odd pink feather fluttered more gently to earth as far away as the Tiergarten, where Hubert cackled softly, tucking away Brian's actual hand next to the sandwiches in his lunchbox. The fools! They took me for granted once too often, he laughed through a mouthful of ham. Never even noticed me make the switch. The fucking end!
Yay! Round of applause.
That's so much fun!
Brilliant.
I never realised you had such good parts.
Oh, well done, everyone. That was really good fun. I really enjoyed that.
Oh God, Lawrence of Arabia.